Welcome to the RCRA Hazardous Waste Determination module. This module is presented by the Kentucky Division of Compliance Assistance, Environmental Compliance Assistance Program. DCA is part of the Kentucky Department for Environmental Protection. Making a proper waste determination is the first crucial step in hazardous waste management system. This module will assist facilities in going through the steps of how to make a hazardous waste determination in order to ensure proper management and disposal of wastes. This module is not a substitute for reading and understanding DEP regulations and just provides a general overview. During this module, we will briefly introduce the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and the Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments, discuss the difference between RCRA hazardous and OSHA hazardous, explain the steps to determine whether a material is a hazardous waste, and what the next steps are if a source is generating hazardous waste. RCRA's goal has 4 elements to protect human health and the environment from the potential hazards of waste disposal, conserve energy and natural resources, to reduce or eliminate waste generation, and ensure proper waste management. RCRA regulations cover solid waste, hazardous waste, and underground storage tanks holding petroleum products or certain chemicals. In this learning module, we will be reviewing the way to determine whether a material is a RCRA hazardous waste. The RCRA regulations were first passed in 1980. Kentucky has since adopted the 2005 federal standards and has delegated authority for these standards, which involve generation, transportation, permitting, land disposal, and universal waste, including used oil. The Hazardous and Solid Waste Amendments of 1984 responded to specific concerns and primarily phased out land disposal, increased enforcement authority, made more stringent management requirements, and involved a comprehensive UST program. To compare RCRA regulations to Kentucky, the KAR, or Kentucky Administrative Regulations, and the CFR, or Code of Federal Regulations, act as companions. As stated, Kentucky has the regulatory authority which is administered through 401 KAR Chapters 30 through 49, although these frequently reference the 2005 CFR. As a state with delegated authority, Kentucky has some differences from the federal regulations. One term that is useful to understand is the frequently used word hazardous as it relates to daily operations at a facility. When discussing RCRA hazardous, it deals with the control or management of waste, whereas OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, regulates protection of an individual against products, wastes, and operations that have a potential to cause harm. The waste is considered RCRA hazardous dependent on chemical composition or other properties that make it capable of causing illness, death, or harm to human and other life forms when the waste is mismanaged or released into the environment. Upon initial consideration of whether a waste is hazardous or non-hazardous, one might assume the determination is simply a matter of chemical composition. However, other factors must be evaluated, including the actual hazards that the chemical composition and properties pose. Irrespective of the hazards a waste may pose, it may become impractical or undesirable to regulate it. For example, it would be inane to attempt to regulate certain wastes from households, which would pose a number of practical problems in administration of the strict RCRA management rules. In order to make a RCRA hazardous waste determination, there are 4 questions you will need to ask about the material. Is the material a solid waste? Is the waste specifically excluded from RCRA? Is the waste a listed hazardous waste? And does the waste exhibit a characteristic of hazardous waste? The first question, is the material a solid waste? Any material becomes a waste when you decide to take it out of service and when you decide to discard it. Before a material can be classified as a hazardous waste, it must first be a solid waste. A solid waste is defined as any garbage, refuse, sludge, and other discarded materials including solid, liquid, semi-solid, or contained gaseous material resulting from industrial, commercial, mining, excluding coal mining waste, coal mining byproducts, refuse and overburden, agricultural operations, and from community activities. Solid waste definition does not include some debris from construction, recovered materials, tire-derived fuel, special waste, solid or dissolved materials in domestic sewage, manure, crops, crop residue used as fertilizers, or soil conditioners, which may be subject to other regulations. The second step is to determine whether the waste is specifically excluded from RCRA. These are the 18 wastes or waste categories which are excluded. Each of these has its own indication of applicability. If you feel as though the waste is classified under one of these categories, be sure to read and review the regulation. Only after determining that a solid waste is not excluded from hazardous waste regulation should the analysis proceed to evaluate the actual chemical hazard that the waste poses. If you have determined that the waste is a solid waste and it's not excluded from RCRA, the next step is to determine if it's a listed waste. There are 4 lists which provide a narrative description of a specific type of waste, which is considered dangerous. Hazardous waste listings describe waste from non-specific industrial sources, or F-listed waste, waste from specific sectors of industry, or K-listed waste, or waste in the form of specific chemical formulations, which are P or U-listed. For the F and K listed waste, any waste fitting a narrative listing description is considered hazardous, regardless of its chemical composition or any other variable. This makes it easy for industrial waste handlers to make waste identification because determination only requires knowledge of the waste origin. However, this also means that the actual composition or laboratory analyses of the waste is not considered if the waste matches a listing description. This means that some waste may be unnecessarily regulated. The P and U lists are based on specific chemical formulations. The F list identifies waste from common manufacturing and industrial processes. Because the processes producing these wastes can occur in various sectors, the F-listed wastes are also known as non-specific source wastes. Examples of these include solvents that are used in cleaning or degreasing operations. The K-listed wastes are identified by specific industries. Specific industries include pesticides, explosives, petroleum refining, etc. Source-specific wastes include certain sludges and wastewaters from treatment and production processes within the identified industries. One K-listed waste may apply to more than one source-specific classification. The P and U lists identify waste by chemical products and CAS, or Chemical Abstract Service numbers. These lists include specific commercial chemical products in an unused form. Some pesticides and pharmaceutical products become hazardous waste when discarded. Also, the P-listed wastes, along with specific dioxins, which are F-listed, are acute hazardous wastes. Some of the more common or well-known P and U-listed wastes include parathion, indosulfan, 2,4-D, and DDT. Even when managed properly, some listed wastes are so dangerous that they are called acute hazardous wastes. Acute wastes can be fatal to humans even in low doses. The wastes include the P-listed wastes and certain F-listed dioxin codes. The remaining codes are non-acute. If the waste is not a listed waste, the last step is to determine if the waste exhibits a characteristic of hazardous waste. A waste is considered hazardous if it exhibits one or more of the characteristics: ignitability, corrosivity, reactivity, and toxicity. All you have to do is remember the trick. A waste is toxic if it's harmful or fatal when ingested or absorbed, or it leaches toxic chemicals into the soil or groundwater when disposed on land. For example, waste which contain high concentrations of heavy metals such as cadmium, lead, or mercury are typically toxic. You can determine if your waste is toxic by having a representative sample tested using the Toxicity Characteristic Leaching Procedure, TCLIP. The TCLIP helps identify wastes which are likely to leach concentrations of contaminants that may be harmful to human health or the environment. A waste is considered reactive if it is unstable, explodes, or produces toxic fumes, gases, and vapors when mixed with water or other under conditions such as heat and pressure. Examples include waste from cyanide plating or sulfide-bearing waste and oxidizers. There are currently no test methods available for reactivity. An ignitable waste, which will catch fire under certain conditions, is spontaneously combustible or has a flash point of less than 60 degrees C or 140 Fahrenheit. Wastes that are typically ignitable include paints, degreasers, and solvents. Test methods that may be used to determine ignitability include the Penske-Martin's closed cup or the Cetaflash closed cup, and the ignitability of solids methods. A waste is corrosive if it's capable of corroding metals or if it has a very high, above 2.5, or very low, below 2, pH. Rust removers, acid, or alkaline cleaning fluids, and battery acid are corrosive wastes. The test method that may be used to determine corrosivity is the corrosivity towards steel method. If you are generating a hazardous waste, you need to determine how much hazardous waste and acute hazardous waste is being produced or generated to determine the generator status as a large quantity, small quantity, or conditionally exempt small quantity generator. As a generator, the liability for the waste generated at your site continues from the point of generation to its final destination. This is often referred to as cradle to grave. If you have determined you are a large or small quantity generator, you are required to register with the Kentucky Division of Waste Management and obtain an EPA ID number. Conditionally exempt small quantity generators are not required to register but may do so to obtain an EPA ID number. Always be sure to review the appropriate ways in which to manage all hazardous wastes. You can follow these questions and flow diagram to determine whether the material is a hazardous waste. Let's go through step by step for a hazardous waste determination. First, is your material a solid waste? If so, then is it a RCRA excluded waste? If not, find out if it is a hazardous waste. To determine whether it is a hazardous waste, find out if it is a listed waste. Remember, there are 4 lists: F, K, P, and U, and if it's considered a P and some of the Fs, it might be acute hazardous. If it isn't a listed waste, then does it exhibit a characteristic of hazardous waste? The waste is considered hazardous if it has one or more of the 4 characteristics: toxic, reactive, ignitable, and corrosive. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact the Division of Compliance Assistance at 800-926-8111. Email us at envhelp@ky.gov or visit us online at dca.ky.gov. or contact the Division of Waste Management at 502-564-6716. For a copy of the slides and script, please click the link provided. Thank you for joining us, and this concludes the Hazardous Waste Determination module.